system? Well, it's that very, very fine balance. For example, you know how much I love my coffee.
Yes.
And so I become aware that I want to have a drink of coffee. My executive functions tell me, hey, I need to reach forward to get my coffee cup. And then once I reach my coffee cup, I want to pull the coffee cup back to me. Think about it. If my reach forward coffee for the coffee cup, they got to be excitatory. But while I'm reaching for the coffee cup, I want my reach back with the coffee cup. As I'm reaching forward for it, I want to pull it back to me to be inhibited. And then, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if they're all firing at the same time, what am I doing? Nothing. I'm frozen. That kind of a thing like that. And again, the fine orchestra of what's going on with the heart muscle, all those kinds of things. And so we see a very fine balance between excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmission all going on at the same time.
Okay.
And again, it's kind of like, how does H2O know to be water? It's just chemistry. That's just the way it works.
All right. Because I felt like I understood that, and then like on the next page it said, and then this neurotransmitter is excitatory, and I'm like, but wait, it's not. But it is.
Well, back, and like I say, when we talk about the brain, one of the really, exciting or frustrating things about the brain is we don't know nearly as much as we'd love to know about the brain. And sometimes, every time we learn one new thing about the brain, one of the things it tells us is a couple of things we thought we knew about the brain maybe aren't so right after all. Everything I tell you guys this semester about the brain, it may be by next semester, I'm not saying that stuff anymore because we learned, and that's not necessarily true after all. And so, the discovery of neurotransmitters, the discovery of subtypes. We don't just have a serotonin. We don't just have a dopamine. We have all kinds of different kinds of subtypes of serotonin, dopamine, and things like that. So it gets more and more complicated. And I use the analogy very often, still to this day, with all the technology we have and everything else. We're still like the Wright brothers when they were sitting on the back steps watching the birds and the butterflies, wondering how and why. And the next thing you know, they're flying an airplane, but we're not ready to fly that airplane yet when it comes to understanding the brain. We've got a lot to learn yet with that. But it's by understanding this, we have those discussions. Is it helping you? As a matter of fact, that was one of the first things I wanted to start with today, is wow points from, once again, make that brain go to work, tell that brain what you like. Wow points from last time, as we did talk about the brain. And again, that phylogenetic understanding of. How do we, by understanding that old brain, by understanding what that brain's there for, what it's doing, how did it learn its job? By understanding that stuff, how do we better understand modern, and especially the foibles of, the problems of modern human behavior? Any wow points from Thursday, as we did, go back into the brain and talk about that. Today we're going to do, again, like we said, we're going to get back into assessment, and we're talking about motivational interviewing, but the first thing I wanted to do, so nice segue there, was, again, wow points from last time, from Thursday. Anybody?
That was a good question, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Any wow point? Yeah.
I don't have a wild point because going off of what she said, but having to do with the action potential and trying to just figure out.
Yeah, it does.
That's basically what tells the neurotransmitters how much.
In other words, and when we get to those neurons on the board, and basically excitatory neurotransmission is going to enhance then the action potential in that movement.
But like exchange of just chemicals that is basically
Right.
like fighting neurons, but then
Right.
all at once and billions of them.
And inhibitory are going to slow that down. So, I mean, another way to look at it is when we see these neurons on the board, that neuron is in its resting or polarized state, waiting for something to happen at around minus 65. If an excitatory transmission comes along, an excitatory message, that's going to create a change in the semi-permeable membrane in a way that's going to start to move up. And so maybe from minus 65 to minus 55, and it's going to fire. But if it's an inhibitory neurotransmission message, it's going to take that from minus 65 to maybe minus 70, minus 75, make it less likely to fire. The fact is that very often when they say, I was bored, they're telling you the truth. They were bored. And that's what that counselor has to pay attention to early on. Where is that now, that arousal level? It may never get back down to where people would say this is where it should be. You know, and let's sing the Kumbaya and the Serenity Prayer, and it's all this. No, for that person, it's probably going to be activated higher. And bored down there, for them, that feels dystonic, that feels bad. And so you have to identify that with that client, and then help that client find what will be probably their newer baseline for that activation, and how do they do that in a healthy, of course, hopefully non-drug way.
What was really interesting too was like on the comment section, all these people were offering, like that answer, I was bored, sparked like outrage in like so many people, and they were like, oh, well, you're confused between depression and and I'm like, nobody put that, and I'm like, it's 2:00 in the morning, I ain't got time to write a response. But I'm going back in there and writing a response about how that whole thing we learned, just to put it out there.
Because,
you know?
If counselors understood that, maybe if a counselor, if this guy had a counselor who helped him get clean, he had houses, he had car, he's been 5 times, he's been up and back down, and things like, if a counselor talked to him about that, and this idea, this is where, let's all be down here together and be happy about it. He was up here. And he may never get back down to here. He may be, where do you help this person find a healthy new baseline, and how do they enjoy that new level of arousal in a way that what do? How can you do that without having to use drugs again and things like that? Yeah, that's a major. It's one of those major important threats to early recovery, to recovery in general. Any other guys? I want you guys to bring wow points with you. Again, what that tells me is, number 1, you're hearing stuff. Number 2, you're looking at this stuff after class. Number 3, you're telling your brain, this is good, this is important, I want to know this stuff. And that's how, when you wow, that's how that brain says, well, that must be important, let me pay attention to that. Those kinds of things like that. All right? Well, again, we will get back to the brain on Thursday. And very quickly, be looking at those neurons, talking to each other, and everything else, and how this stuff all works like that. Today, we're going to continue with, as we left off last Tuesday, with the assessment, the motivational interviewing stuff. Again, using your ability to establish that relationship as we're collecting this information, as we're forming this relationship with this client. Remember, as we're moving from a nomothetic diagnostic label to a true, real understanding of that client. Another really neat little thing you can do as you're seeking that information is building motivation with that client. What a wonderful time. You got to be talking about this stuff anyway. You are collecting information. And gang, what did I say last Tuesday again? Please, it's not just to fill out some stupid form, that just the basic busy work, paperwork stuff and things like that. It's you getting to know that person in that way, understanding how they're thinking, why they're thinking, what is this past, what is this, what is that? How is that working into the way you understand why that brain would be doing and helping that person make the decisions? You know, one of the bottom lines I often talk about, that brain, in a nutshell, what does it do? It takes in all this information. We're hearing stuff, seeing stuff, smelling stuff, thising, thating, all this information. What's going on right now? And then it takes all that sensory information and it assembles a kind of a mental picture for itself. What's the situation right now? And then, as it processes that information, the next step is to try and figure out what's the next best right thing to do. That's it. That's the brain. And of course, the next best right thing to do would be something that's going to promote its health, its well-being, and of course, not only itself, but the rest of the body in a way that we move on and we have that life. It takes in all this information in a way that what? So that it can understand what is going on right now. And then the next step is, how does it orchestrate what is the next best right thing to do? Our dilemma is, how come then we modern humans, how come our clients, instead of deciding and then executing what's the next best right thing to do, end up deciding and doing what's not the best right thing to do. Does that make sense? And it's by understanding that brain that way that we're looking at. Understanding why. And to that brain, what today may look like such wrong, self-destructive, self-defeating things, to that brain, that does feel like the next best right thing to do. Get the hell out of there. Don't forget, the only thing that matters to that brain, bottom line, is get out of there. Kill the tiger. Get out of there, or something like that. Because if you don't do that, if you don't successfully deal with whatever that now perceived threat is, nothing else really matters anyway. Who cares about a relationship? Who cares about what you had planned for tomorrow or next year? Who cares about it if you're nothing now but tiger lunch? Does that make sense? And we need to understand that. As you get to know this client and you get to understand this client in a way that what looks like such wrong stuff, why is it? Why? You're building this under, why is that making sense to that client's brain right now? Why does that feel to that client's brain like that is the next best right thing to do? What is it about that client's brain's experience? What is it about what's happened in that client's brain's life? What is it about the learning history, the process to the product and everything else? What is it about that brain's experience that leads to doing what is obviously, we're looking at this, self-destructive, self-defeating, ridiculous, whatever else. Why is that making sense to that person's brain right now? Does that make sense? Then, as you get to know that client and can start to communicate with that client in that client's experiential language, and get to know who this person is. And you need to have that understanding. You can also start to build from the very beginning, start to work on that motivation. And that client has motivation right now. They have all kinds of motivations. And that also drives counselors nuts. What is your motivation for being here? I'm here because if I didn't go here today, I'd have to go to jail. My wife will leave me, I'll lose my job or whatever else. And you said, that's not the right motivation. You said, that's not the right reason to be here. You should be here for the right reasons. And then we get into a big stupid argument with that client about why they're here and all that kind of a thing. And that just it reduces the quality of that empathy bond and all that. No, motivational interviewing is a way that we can talk with, interact with the client, and without necessarily directly saying, here's what you need to do. If you want your life to get better, if you want that, you know what, I'm tired of your bullshit. Here's what you got to do this. If you don't do this, then you're just... Does that work, you guys? No, it doesn't work. Motivational interviewing. How can we convey these very important messages in a way that that client can and will hear it in a way that it can start to move that client from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation? Wanting because it feels right to do the right things for the right reasons. That's what motivational interviewing is all about. And you do this in the course of you're working with your client in terms of collecting that information. How? Yeah, assessment as an intervention. Now, always be careful with that. Don't be jumping too soon. You know, when I talk about assessment, what is assessment? Collecting information. Getting to know who this person is. Understanding what's the hows, the whys of this person's current addiction decision-making process. That's what assessment is. Assessment means you're trying to find out what the situation, what the problems are, so that you will be able to then, the next step, do the interventions that can help that client with those problems, those issues. And then I said intervention or assessment as an intervention. In other words, just talking to people, just asking these questions, just helping this client hear themselves again. Just The way that we formulate our interactions so that client can hear what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're thinking. Instead of me telling you the inconsistency of your two latest thoughts and how they're not working together and how they're and this and that, let that client discover that themselves. Does that make sense? They own that then. Then they can move forward with that. It's, again, this story. Within a half hour, that girl is sitting back looking at me with that puzzled look on her face and saying, I think I need to talk about my marijuana use. And that kind of thing. Now, she owns that. When I say, though, be careful, don't jump too fast. Don't start to intervene on something until you know what it really is in the first place. And we are at the assessment level here. I'm trying to figure out what needs intervention at this point. Not necessarily. And the big picture, the big picture is, again, what was that number one? The number one goal?
Don't do that.
Don't do that no more. Or at least change, in this day and age, change the way you're doing that thing. That person, you take one quick look at their history right now, their current situation right now. They were just arrested for their third DUI, and they blew a .22. How much intervention do we need to know there's a problem there with that? What was it? It's what you need to. The assessment is to discover what. Not the first level, necessarily. The don't do that no more level. But what's that second level, you guys? Always remember, this is what the assessment's for. The first level, that's obvious. Look at the current circumstances, the current situation, what that person's doing. That kind of thing. It's pretty obvious. There's a serious drug or alcohol problem here. But what's the second level stuff?
Why they're doing that?
That's a way to put it. Or what are the issues that need to be addressed with this client? What are the things that this client needs to work on in counseling and drug and alcohol treatment? What are the issues this person needs to work on in a way that they can get to the point that they don't do that no more? In other words, the things that we got to work on. And specifically, how we work on them with that particular person. Those are the things. These are the things that we got to work on to get the client to have a chance to get to the one, which is that don't do that, make that major change in their life in the first place. And one of the first things we have to work on is their motivation. Don't forget, this client is well entrenched in their hedonic calculus right now. It's working for them. Their way of looking at this, their way of excusing this, their way of justifying what they're doing, why they're doing it, all that kind of stuff. It's working for them really good. That's why they're still doing it. We have to figure out a way to get into that. And that's what that motivational interviewing is all about. How to readjust this client's cognitive negotiation strategy. What is that? The way they're thinking, feeling, remembering. How they're letting the way they're thinking, feeling, remembering guide their current perceptions, guide their current decision-making process. We have to get that client to want to change that. We need to get that client to start to talk about change. And I'm not talking about shallow level, okay, what do you want me to say? I know you're the boss, you're in charge, I've got to say the right stuff, or you'll say bad stuff about me to my probation officer or to whoever else. No, I'll say, what do you want me to say so I can get you off my ass? So I don't want that level of change. I want, hey, I need to take a look at this. I need to step back. What's going on here? What do I need to start to do different in my life? We want to start to hear that change talk. Change talk, when recognized by the counselor. And then as that counselor then cashes in on that change talk will start to turn into changed behaviors. Change, as we help that client start to understand how this isn't working for them. And again, in your face, well, here's how come it's not working for you. Look at all the bad stuff going on. Do I even have to button this up here anymore? Look at all the bad stuff going on. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with that brain in your head? Why can't you stop? Look at this. Look at all this bad stuff. You keep doing it. What's going on with you? How come you're like that? What's wrong with that brain in your head? That doesn't work, you guys. Not in the long run. Again, for the precious few, that hard sell approach maybe has worked. And there are people out there, and they haven't used drugs or alcohol for 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. And all they ever had was that hard sell approach. Fantastic, great, at least. And that's great for that 15 to 18%. But how about all the other people? It's not working for them. And we have to take that step further. And that's what motivational interviewing is all about. Yeah, we're interviewing. We're interacting with that person. Yes, I have a specific couple of purposes. I need to find out more stuff about you. I'm trying to form this empathy bond. I'm trying to form a movement from nomothetic diagnosis to an idiographic understanding of the unique human individual. What are the dynamics behind their hedonic calculus, their decision-making process? I'm also, with this, can I also sneak in some change stuff? Can I plant some seeds that will one day become the flowers of a change of thought, change talk, change behaviors? Does that make sense? And that's what this motivational interviewing is all about. Questions, thoughts with that? We left last time, we were looking at, well, and again, motivational interviewing loves acronyms. They love acronyms in motivational interviewing. And let's just refresh this and then move on. What was R, a rule? Resist. Resisting the writing reflex. Is everybody cool with that? We talked about that last Tuesday. And again, what is that? Yeah, but at least you got your health. You know, that trying to, what is that? That's just some sneaky way of trying to get somebody. It doesn't really, yeah, you're right about that, I guess. I got my health. But does it really? No. And besides that, if you get a client thinking about those negative consequences, do you want them to stop? Necessarily. Well, yeah, but at least you got your health. Let's not worry about it. No, let that client think about it and worry about that for a minute. Let that stuff germinate. Now, it's not that we're going to shove it down their throat. Okay, you're finally looking at the consequences. Let's shove them down your throat, but let's not try and stop it either with some cute little, well, yeah, but at least kind of a thing. Resist that writing reflex we talked about. Thoughts, questions with that? Yes, sir.
Can I give you my definition to make sure that it's correct?
Okay.
The resisting the writing reflex is don't try to patronize the client's trauma issues and try to make them change their feelings to great while they are personally dealing with personal hardship. Let them feel felt and let them discuss their feelings.
Very well said. Very well said. That's a nice way to put that. Very well said. Resist that writing reflex. Now again, gang, remember there's always very fine lines here. There's a difference between resisting the writing reflex and shoving that stuff down their throat. It's a very fine, balanced way. Very well said with that. And yes, and at some point, if this client is starting to become aware at a different level of that stuff right there, well, at least you said, yeah, well, at least you see what I'm saying with that. Well, at least you didn't take your Harley or whatever it may be. What purpose is that right now? Well, I'll tell you what purpose that is. You have a counselor who is uncomfortable with the client having dystonic feelings, negative feelings, and so they want to help that client feel better right away. Now, counselors that think their only job is to make sure everybody's feeling happy all the time. No. Let that energy, maybe this is a good place for that energy to be right now. Let them start to think about and feel. And again, though, the difference between that and shoving it down their throat, do you get that point?
What are you specifically saying to force down their throat?
In other words, to make that person Yeah, you're right. Your wife wants a divorce. So you know why she wants a divorce, don't you? Because you fucking want that kind of thing.
Right.
Let them.
We don't patronize them about trying to change
But
their
we
mind.
don't also enhance it to the point that it turns into a used to.
Right.
In other words, okay, let's talk about that then.
Right.
And again, what did I say? Not necessarily oldies. Another thing that counselor, I don't know what the book that said it. The only thing how does that make you feel? No. How about what do you think about that? How are you thinking about that? And so yes, okay, let them now. I'm feeling this. Okay, I'm not going to try and stop it. Okay, well, at least you still got your honey or whatever. But at the same time, I don't want to just ram it down their throat either. I want them. They've enjoyed the thought about this. Let's let that happen nicely. Does that make sense? Yeah, what do you think? How does that? How are you thinking about that right now? What does that mean to you right now when she said that to you? And do you see what I'm saying with that? And let that client then start to talk about that. Instead of, yeah, you're right. See, there's another one. Well, there's another one. Too bad we didn't notice this one maybe about a year and a half ago. You see what I'm saying with that? I'm going to really, that client, they're worried about that. I'm going to really use this one. This will be good injury. I'm going to motivate them to want to get better. Yeah, see, you fucked up your marriage. Well, there's another thing we can put on the fucked up side. Huh? That's shoving it down their throat.
Yeah.
Versus, well, let's talk about that. All right, then talk to me about that. Talk to me. What are you thinking about that? What does that mean to you? Does that make sense? Let that client do it.
So basically, writing the writing reflex basically derails introspection.
Derails introspection. It derails also a willingness to,
Well, without that introspection, they're not. I mean, once they recognize that, the potential for willingness is there.
And again.
And if they're willing to look into it.
And let's move with that energy, but move with it well. Move with it well.
That goes back to you said the right time.
Right time, right place, right way, right this, right that, right motivational level.
Right.
And things. What if the client, well, what does that mean to you? What are you thinking about that right now? Well, what that means to me is it's just another way that I fucked up. That's what it means to me, right? Then let's move with that. Well, that doesn't mean you fucked up. I mean, now don't do that. Okay, I hear you saying that this is just another way that you fucked up. Let's talk about it. You see what I'm saying? Rolling with that energy instead of trying to change it right there. And again, that natural instinct for a client, I want my client to feel better. Or for a counselor, I want my client to feel better. Everybody's got to feel good all the time. Happy. We got to all be happy. And they're not going to be happy if they, at least you didn't this or that. Gang, let that client roll with. Let that client start to work with that. How does this mean something? And as you start to do that and they start to get true understanding of this meaning, these things, the dynamics of that changes in that Hedonic calculus.
So then how do you deal with, all right, what if they're like starting to use all this victim language, like, all this bad shit happened to them, but it's not really their fault, and if everyone else would do what they wanted,
that's
can
where
you
I'm
call
going to
them
start
out
to
on
do,
that?
I'm going to start to do Columbo interviewing.
Okay.
I'm going to start to remember. I'm going to, and the term we use for that is called alert ignorance. I'm going to ask, instead of say, not everybody hates you. Come on, I mean, there's how many billion people, when you say everybody hates you, no, how about, instead of that, how can I ask questions? I know what I want to say to this person next. This is an obvious inconsistency. It's an obvious inaccurate way to talk about their situation right now. It's an obvious self-defeating way to think about their situation right now. And I could just run up and confront that and say, stop it, look at how you're thinking, no wonder. That kind of a thing. That's not working, though. Instead, I know what I want to say. How can I now formulate an interaction, the questions, the I notice, I wonders, the I wonders, and things like that. That you just basically, you bring it to the point that this client is saying to him or herself basically what you wanted to say to him or her. Does that make sense? Does that, you guys are asking very, very good questions. These are good questions. This is the stuff of counseling with this. Again, and how are you going to know how to do that kind? I call it Columbo interviewing. If you remember Columbo, by the end of the episode, I get it, get this guy away from me, yes, I get it, I did the crime, please arrest me. They ended up saying, well, you know, how can I alert ignorance? Listening for, I hear the inconsistency, I hear the self-defeating thought, I hear the inaccuracy being conveyed right now by this person, I hear how they thinking this is going to result in, I hear that victimization, I hear that Fremeism, and everything else. And I could just jump right in there and let's have a big old fist fight about that and see, does that accomplish it? Or alert ignorance. I know what I want to say. Let me now interact with this. Let me pose the thoughts, the I wonders, in a way that pretty soon they're saying to me exactly what I wanted to say to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you hear what I'm saying with that? Everybody cool? Thoughts?
Say that one more time.
I'm going to pose the
listen
question.
for the victimization and the alert ignorance. Then you let the client.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the questions that will end up where that client is saying to me exactly what I wanted to say to them.
Okay.
At some point, all of a sudden, I'm thinking out loud. I'm wondering out loud. It's not that I'm going to tell John what a dumbass thing he just said. I'm thinking out loud. I'm just wondering out loud how. Let me see. Well, and then and then all of a sudden, John, you know what? That was a pretty dumb thing to say. That's not a very good way to look at that. What am I going to do then? You think maybe you finally got it? No, I'm going to say, well, that's interesting. We could talk about that then. You see what I'm saying with that? Always rolling with that energy. Let that energy take on more and more of itself that way. Resist the writing reflex. It's toxic to a good clinical interaction. I saw a thought.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, so when you're in a conversation like that with someone, then, like you said, thinking out loud made me think, so if I'm thinking out loud and I'm wondering, that's pretty much posing like a problem to the client. That's their own problem without saying the problem, and then they're solving it on their own. Like that thinking, that wonder. Oftentimes when you present someone with a problem-solving situation, it's easier for them to reflect on it or figure out how they're going to make their next move.
Right.
So if we present that information to them, like using their own, doesn't make sense. I know. My brain is like, I know what I want to say, but like, I don't know.
Well, that's why you're here and why you're putting this together. You know, another thing I may do is, how about this one? I'm having a hard time understanding how you're making this connection. Now, I didn't say your connection is full of shit. You're full
right.
of shit.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm having a difficult time. Can you say
We
that
just did
to
it,
me
actually.
again, but say it different in a way that I can maybe, I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like if you present it as, I need some assistance from you. Can you help me? That person's more willing
Right.
to open up and put
Help
that
me
information out there,
understand.
but really they're helping themselves in the long run.
Well, that's the whole point of
That's
it.
the whole, okay.
Yeah, and another way. I'm not saying what you're saying is stupid, full of shit, wrong, or I'm saying I don't get it. Help
Yeah.
me get it.
Yeah.
And then as that client said, well, let me try to say it this way. Let me go, you know what? I don't get it either. You know what? That really doesn't make sense.
Right.
You see how that
Yes.
moves like that.
Mhm.
Versus, you're so full of shit. Do you hear the bullshit you're trying to tell me right? Do you hear the difference between those two things?
It's the removing of I'm superior to you because I'm degreed or I'm titled.
Well, that's another
That's-
thing it can do, yeah.
And it's, you're meeting this person on a human level
That's
and saying,
another
let
thing
me
you can do with
understand
that.
you.
But it's just letting that client hear that. Rolling with, you know, the big thing, roll with resistance. Actually, it's roll with whatever good, healthy energy is going on with you and that client right now. And especially in the beginning, just about every damn thing that client's doing could be considered resistance one way or another if you're not careful. But the thing is, it's letting that energy happen. Recognizing and letting that energy happen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The ready and reflex can be toxic for that. Understanding. This is where understanding. Gang, once again, what did I just say? What did I just say? Understanding client motive. What did I just say a minute ago? Understanding why that person's brain thinks this wrong thing is the next best right thing to do. How come this person thinks that? How come this person, when they answer a question with some of the most ridiculous, in your face, resistance, denial, projection, whatever it may be, when that client tells you, well, here's what I'll do if that happens, I'll just fucking say what, and you're sitting there. Instead of contesting that right now, seek to understand why is it that feels like the next best right thing to do to that person? Why does that feel like the next best right thing to do? That brain. This is what I need to do next. And this is wrong, it's dangerous, it's bad, it's self-defeating, it's self-destructive, it's this, it's that, it's everything else. And instead of just jumping up and down and hollering and screaming about that, well, how come that feels like the next best right thing to do to that person right now? Understanding that, what is fueling this person's hedonic calculus? Why is still all this bad on the surface? Somehow or another, I can't help but end up with this on the board, can I? What is it right now? Why is all this bad still worth it to the client? Why is it that whatever this person and you in your heart of heart, this is so wrong. It's so this. It's so that. It's so contrary to recovery. It's so why though is that feeling to that person right now like the next best right thing to do? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Then you're going to have an understanding for how you're going to do your next best right thing in terms of your next response. How does it go? In comes all this information, meshes with, so that out goes the next best response. Kind of thing like that. Understanding client motivation.
Once again, my definition, try to understand what the client's motivation is and how it is working for them right now. Then the counselor can redirect their motivation toward the path of trying to get the addiction or recovery they actually need and possibly deeply actually want.
But you know what? The last part of that, another way to before even that, just right now in the beginning here, with all we're trying to do is get this client to even start to think about, consider change.
Just think about change.
Think about change. Allowing it. This one, so very important. The L, listening with empathy. We have talked about that one. And again, you want that message to come through. You just look at your own personal experience with this. And something, I care about, this is what you gotta do, this is why I'm mad at you, this is why I'm upset, this is what you gotta do. And you say, is this person really feeling me? You need to feel felt, don't you? If you're gonna listen to that client needs to feel felt.
Dan,
Listen, what does listen with empathy mean? You're listening to hear in a way to understand that person. Versus listen to hear what's the next stupid thing this person's going to say that you can jump on and try and shove back up their ass. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens in relationships so often. Again, the discussion started, where do we go to dinner tonight, honey? And the next thing you know, we're not even listening to each other. All I'm trying to, what's the next thing you're going to say that I can use against you? What's the next thing? That kind of a thing like that. Listening with empathy is listening, hearing, in a way that you can truly understand and then convey that real understanding to that client in a way that they will feel felt. What were you going to say?
I was just gonna say, like, some stories or some of the situations are so, like, heart-wrenching, or you feel them on a personal level. You know, how do you do that? Like, how do you listen to, like, just by watching these videos that I've been watching, I said to my wife last night, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this job. Because I was like, I felt so upset for them for what, I could see their ones and twos, you know what I mean? And that's the whole purpose of me watching it, is to kind of point out and pick out and learn what I'm watching and what I'm looking for. But I'm like, the first 7 years of this person's life was hell, you know? Wow.
The best answer to that question is, and I know that you guys hate this answer.
Next semester,
it's the counter-transference, the getting into ourselves and things like that.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that because that's a very important issue. It's a dreadfully important issue.
That would have been one of the questions I asked. How can you turn your heartstrings off?
Well, you don't turn them off. You don't turn them off.
I mean, I know there's a professionalism. I get that, but
Professional, but you still have a heart.
Well, and you
to
can't turn
understand
it off,
the
and we're not
person.
going to try and turn it off. We're going to try and learn how to manage that well within the parameters of that particular relationship you're having in your life right now.
there's going to be a healthy balance of listening with empathy, but next semester we'll learn how to
And again,
not take
and
it.
that whole idea
Gotcha.
of counter-transference and things like that, that's one of the biggest issues.
Okay.
So many of these things. I mean, this is about life.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? We all got life. We all got this. We all got that. We all got that. And so, yeah, we're going to be bumping into very personal, touching things.
Mm-hmm.
How do we manage that? Empower the client. What does that mean? Gang, one of the biggest, with this, when we look at this and we tell that client, look at this, you're ruining your life for the fun of it. That is so. That's out of control. That's insane. That's this. That's that. Look at what you have to admit that you're out of control. You have to admit you're powerless. You must admit you're powerless. You're not going to get better until you admit you're powerless. Oh, crap, yeah, that's why I'm doing all this in the first place. You see what I'm saying with that? And what we have to, and empower the client, what does that mean, especially early on? That client needs to believe they can. They need to start to believe in themselves. That client needs to believe in their ability to make change in their life. That client needs to start, they're taught, they're preached that this is something that has consumed them. They now have this overreaching disease of self-destruction. It is insane. It is out of control. It is this. It is that. And gang, on the surface, it does look. This person, it does look pretty crazy, doesn't it? They're ruining their life for the fun of it. We have to help that client feel a sense of personal ability, personal power, belief in self. And we need to start to do that from the very, very beginning.
How do you do that?
Again, it's the way that we speak with that client. How about, number one, stop telling the client how out of control they are, how powerless they are, and that.
Because they know that. Like, we know that as addicts, how out of
I
control
don't even want them to know that.
Yeah.
I want them to start to think I'm going to start to ask more empowerment kinds of questions. Instead of asking if, I'm going to ask when type of questions. When you reach this goal, when you can solve this problem, when I'm going to speak to that client in terms of helping them feel the positive sense of self instead of the negative. Everybody in drug treatment wants to focus on all the bad stuff and look at this, you're out of control and you're out of power. In fact, Hey, you know what? You better. Hey, take a look at step number 1. If you want to get bottom line here, you better take step 1. If you don't do step number 1, you can't do number 2. And if you don't do that, well, you're never going to get better. You better admit you're powerless. Oh, for crying out loud. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
You don't have to break them to fix them.
I mean, think about it. Where's the motivation? I mean, and gang, well, I've been in AA and I know AA works. What are you talking about? You know what? What is AA's true, real statistical success rate? Does anybody know?
50%.
Pardon me?
50%.
Not even close to 50%.
18%.
Not even close. Around 15 to 18%.
About the same as the.
Yes. And so that's not working. And I've always said, if you meet somebody and the only thing they ever did was AA and it's working for them, don't take that from them.
Yeah, back off my AA.
Huh?
Back off my AA. That's the only
Yeah,
thing
that's
I
the other thing. Go right out there. You should hear what Kel said today. Don't do that.
Oh.
But do you hear what I'm saying with this?
Yeah.
No, that makes
That
sense.
client needs, I mean, that client already feels absolutely unable, vulnerable, can't, and everything else. Their personal use history, their personal relapse history has already shown them. And then somebody that, see, I told you, you're not saying, you see, you're helpless. You guys can see, this is what's happening. You're helpless, you're just out of control, you're not sick. How does that help somebody? I mean, think about it. If I'm standing in the woods and I notice a grizzly bear several times bigger than me is after my ass, oh shit, I'm helpless, I might as well give up here. Or at least am I going to do something to try and get the hell out of there. Does that make sense? And the more I figure that this is over with before I even start, the less I'm going to try and get the hell out of there. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you hear what I'm saying? I mean, and I know that's been the popular wisdom for years. But just because it's been the popular wisdom doesn't mean it's been the right thing to do. For a long time, this is where the mind lived. That doesn't mean ultimately that that was correct. Does that make sense to you guys? Mm-hmm. And so empowering the client. Listen,
Can I
go
give you my
into this.
definition on that?
Pardon me?
Can I give you my definition on that so you can correct it?
Very quickly, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it says empower the client, have the client own up to what their addiction has done, but work with the client to feel okay about themselves. Forgive themselves for their past uses of their drug use and past destruction they may have caused. The past is over, today is a brand new day, and the client can now control the future they're working on now.
That's everything you said is good and right, but empower means before they can do some of those things, they have to truly believe they can in the first place.
Okay,
That they have to believe they can anything.
What is that internal,
Again, intrinsic.
intrinsic?
Intrinsic. They have to believe they can. Everything you said was good, and those are all really good goals and things to work on. But before most of that stuff can happen, at this point, it's just we have to. What was another word I've said many times? We have to de-insanitize that client. We have to help them stop feeling so nuts, uniquely flawed. We have to help that person stop feeling as if they somehow or another are in possession of a uniquely flawed way of living that basically takes over their ability to do anything about it. They have to start to believe in themselves. Empowering at this point in the game is basically that they can, that they really can. You know, we talked about that with self-efficacy way back. And right now, there's people laying at the detox unit. The nurses have done the vitals, and in comes the counselor. Oh, you know what? You can do this. You can do that. You can do this. I got a bed for you right now. We can get you into treatment. We can do this. We can do that. And that client's laying there. They don't believe they can do any of that shit. How hard are you going to try to do something you already know you can't do? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Empowering that client. And a lot of empowering the client here, how do you do that? Is by, instead of dictating to the client at this point, instead of telling the client what to do, think, this and that, let that client and join a let's look at options kind of a discussion. And whatever those options may be, let that client feel you believe they can. They may not yet, but let them feel you believe they can. You see what I'm talking about with that? Now, owning responsibility, those are all very important things down the line and stuff like that. But right now, with none of that's going to help if that client's got to get to the point of, I believe I can. Maybe. And in the beginning, that may be, I believe that maybe just possibly, I don't know, maybe I can.
Can you tell me, you say you're the counselor that walks into that person who's detoxing. Can you just briefly tell me some things that you would say to that person? We did this before, but I forgot what you said. What you would say to them in that moment. Because you do feel like shit. You're not trying to hear that, but what would you say?
The first thing is I would not say certain things. I would not shove their current circumstances and their consequences up their ass.
Right.
That's not going to help. Well, what did I say? Well, I'm going to not try and guilt them. Well, it looks like we had a good time last night. How were the kids? Well, I guess you don't know. You don't give a fuck about the kids. You were too busy having fun. I'm not going to try and scare them out of it. Well, if you don't stop this, here's all the bad things that are going to happen. I'm not going to promise them the world if they do. I'm going to be very calm with this person at this point. If this person's sick enough, I'm not going to do anything right now except help them feel better in the right now, here and now. But eventually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to ask future-oriented questions. I'm going to start to ask at that point, and again, ask that person the kinds of questions, again, that will do these kinds of things in a way that they may start to consider change.
Okay.
Those depend on the client. They depend.
Sure.
That's your ability to take in this take in thing. That's why, gang, very often, what do I say? You guys need to know this stuff. It's not one of these things, I see you have that blade to your neck. Could you hold for just a second? I got to go look something up. No, it's your ability to think on your feet right then and there. What's the next best right thing to say to this person under these circumstances with this going on? But that right then and there. That think on your feet kind of a thing. Strategies. Increasing importance. What they mean by increasing importance is talking to that client in a way that they start to, because at this level, don't forget, what's important, although they don't realize it, what's important is this right here. Getting away from this. What they see is this. The big, fuck it, I'm going to go have fun. Helping to increase importance, number one. The things they're losing, instead of shoving it in their throat, let them start to consider this stuff in a mild, not shove up their ass, not make it so it becomes a use cue, incentive kind of a thing, but in a way that they can start to, this is more important to them. This is important to me. Increasing importance of what I'm losing, and I don't want to lose that. It does matter to me. I know. I've been saying for the last 2 years, I don't care. I do care. How do you, in a way that helps this client slowly but surely morph from I don't give a shit to I do give a shit? Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying with this? This stuff does matter to me. Yeah, they have learned. Don't forget, what is acquired, hedonic, caught? They have learned how not to feel this loss. That's one of those most important psychological aspects of a severity of addiction, is that client. The better they are at not feeling this loss, the more entangled they're going to be in this payoff. Does that make sense? Help them start to, again, increasing importance, help that client slowly, again, not shove up their help that client start the Columbo interview. Talk about, hey, you're doing an assessment. You gotta fill out this damn stupid report for the funders or whatever. Part of that's gonna be, what have you lost as a function of your addiction? Don't just list it, well, I lost my wife, I lost my job, I lost my this, I lost my that, I lost my that. Enjoying that. Not as a, well, see, there's another thing you lost. Okay, so you lost your wife. Well, you fucked that up too, huh? No. How about instead of, what does that loss mean? I'm interested, I wonder, as you lost this, how is it that was made to feel okay? It was okay to lose that. For what? Does that make sense? I'm going to ask that. I wonder about this. I'm interested. Help me understand. How come that was worth it? How come losing that wasn't important? You said, well, I'm not saying it wasn't important. It was very important. Well, we just hit ourselves a big inconsistency, didn't we? Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that loss was very important to you. Now, what's the next thing the counselor that doesn't know better is going to, but I guess it wasn't important enough, was it? You see what I'm saying? I will hunt you down. You see how that's the wrong thing to say right there? Oh, okay, that's interesting. Talk to me about that. How is that important? Why is that important? How did that fall into this category? How did that happen? You see what I'm saying with that? Let that client see that, feel that. Does that make sense?
They haven't lost anything. And I know that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I've got this sponsee, she's a stay-at-home mom. She is still married, she still has her car, she still has her husband, she still has her kids. She doesn't have a job to lose. I can't quite, and she's just chronic relapser because she refuses to feel feelings. And I'm at a loss for how do I get her to, what are we doing, right? It's kind of where I'm at right now. Is how do you...
Why are you talking to her about it?
Because she's in AA and she
Why
says
is she in
she
AA?
wants... that's what I can't figure out.
What does she want?
Well, I guess that's what we need to figure out.
What does she want?
I assume to stop.
What does she want that she thinks she's going to get via AA?
Okay.
Why is she choosing to go? Because somehow or another, somewhere in her brain, she has made a connection that drinking is costing her something she doesn't want to pay for anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You haven't found it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why the hell go through all the problem? I've got better things to do than go to a damn meeting. And she's going there. Why? Because something making her want to make this change, or at least consider that change. What is it? You haven't found it yet, but it's there.
But what if they're extrinsic reasons?
That's okay.
Okay.
Don't forget that. Extrinsic reasons.
Try to slow
What
down.
is wrong with not wanting to lose it?
To get
Something
your husband
like-
off your back, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That kind of a thing. What is wrong with that? And so the thing is that she is losing something. If she wasn't losing anything and she was just drunk all the time, why the fuck go to AA? I'm having a great time. My life is great, perfect, it's wonderful. I get to stay drunk all the time and nothing. You see what I'm saying? But that's not what she's doing. She's at AA. Why?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Increasing importance. Developing discrepancies. Hearing. The very thing you just said. I developed a discrepancy with your question. She's not losing a thing. Then what the hell is she doing going to AA? There's a discrepancy there. You see what I'm saying? Now, I answered you in a more direct way than I would a client, because you're not my client, you're a student.
Sure.
And we're here to teach, and I don't have a half hour to just deal with this. But the thing is, developing this, listening, when you listen to hear instead of listen to fight back, you're going to hear all kinds of discrepancies. And that's where you ask the I notice, I wonder questions. That's where, help this client hear those discrepancies. Once again, well, they heard what they said, no, they didn't. That's where reflection of feelings, paraphrasing becomes so very important. What I hear you saying is, I'm confused. First you said this, and then you see what I'm saying? Help me understand this. Not, I just heard what you said, and that's just a bunch of crap. No wonder you're so fucked up. Listen to the way listen to how you're trying. That's what a idiot counselor would say. You're gonna help me understand. I don't get this. I don't get this. To me, when I hear this and I hear that, this is what, you see what I'm saying? Help me understand how those can fit together and work still. Help me with that. That kind of a thing like that. Developing discrepancies. Help that client hear. Help that client feel those discrepancies. And how? And where are most of those discrepancies living? By the way, in their current what? Boy, I sneak everything back one way or the other, don't I? In their current what? Their addiction survival persona. The way they are living with this. It's okay to do this because it's and again, not in their face, shoot it back at them. No, I need, help me understand how that fits. Help me understand how those two things work together. Let that client reflect to that client. When I'm developing discrepancies, that's where I will sometimes on purpose incorrectly reflect so that that client's got to tell me. And what they're going to correct themselves by correcting me. Those kinds of things. Yes, hand.
Okay, my definition to develop these discrepancies is look at the discrepancies that the client may have toward being in the treatment program or past drug use. Listen and wonder and work with the client on changing their cognitive dissonant thinking and beliefs. Counselor must do it at the right time, right way, and right motivation. Then you also say use the what way?
Again, paraphrasing, active listening, reflection.
Reflection, paraphrasing.
Reflection,
that's
paraphrasing. That kind of thing in a way that, again, gang, that with everything, I mean, their way of thinking right now that gives them permission to stay in this. Their way of thinking right now that makes this feel like it's still working for them. How do you help that person start to see and feel those discrepancies in a way that you see what I'm saying? If I look at this thing different, all of a sudden this ain't worth losing anymore over that. You see what I'm saying with that? That's slow. All of a sudden that person's like, maybe that's not worth it after all. As they start to feel those discrepancies, as they start to, all of a sudden, their cognitive dissonance system isn't working for them so good anymore. And slowly but surely undermining. As long as this is working, they will keep doing what they're doing. When all of a sudden this isn't working so well anymore, that's when change becomes a pretty attractive option. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can I be going along with your increasing importance? Because under that, I got discussing with the client how important feel like and how much of a change in a person's life. How important it is that it change.
Well,
when you was talking about this morning, you said change, talk, change, keep doing the change, talk, until the client begins to self-actualization of himself, and the counselor assists the client with the change that the client wants and now making his life.
Cool. Good.
So that's part of the increasing the importance.
Increasing the importance of what this person appears to not be caring about and is losing. Okay. Increasing the importance of, you know what, I'm doing this, and and I'm losing that, but I don't care because this is what, no, it's not worth it. Help that client. When these things become more important, all of a sudden this isn't worth it anymore. All of a sudden this isn't worth it anymore. Increasing importance. And when those things become more important, this isn't worth it anymore. Does that make sense? We're going to pick up with this as we get back from our break. Let's take a quick break. We'll get back and, hey gang, I got some stuff up here. I don't want people fighting over stuff. But, I mean, we've got a couple of That's how that brain gets to work. That's how that brain, hey, let me interact with this. Let me think about this in a way that, okay, I see how I could. I might use this way. I might that. This, that. Thoughts, questions, reactions.
This shit's hard. It's a lot harder than I ever. Okay. I feel like it'll come naturally. Just have to let it happen, right?
Well,
but
and this isn't a quite, because, one of the things with this is it does go against the grain in some way.
yeah.
You want to just reach down there and pull this insight, this awareness, this stop thinking that way out of somebody's head, and say, look at this, you damn fool.
Mm-hmm.
And this, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Work with it this way instead. And so it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a people that they talk, when they start to adopt this with their clients and they get better at it and they start to use this in their personal life, their relationships start to feel better. Things start to work better in those ways also. As they, again, compare how. How would this work in a, once again, where do you want to go out to eat tonight discussion? And how all of a sudden that turns into a big fight and everything. And how could we, so yeah, it's a curve, it's a learning, it's an acquired ability a different way. And part of it is, it goes against that grain sometimes. But, what I really want to say right now is, no, sometimes what you really want to say right now is really not the right thing to say right now. And that's the point of that. That's what that's all about. Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed out the definition because I think we had started.
We really hadn't started anything yet.
The ruler exercise?
I haven't started that yet.
The definition, okay.
I'm going to start that right now, but I just wanted some thoughts, reactions at this point.
I think the hardest part for me is just the patience it's going to take, because it's such a slow, methodical process.
Right.
And especially in dealing with addiction, like, you just want them to stop and you want them to stop right now. But like, you could conceivably, you're still doing this while they're using,
Well, yeah, and again, if we have a person in treatment, we kind of hope that active use has been changed to some extent or something. But yeah, you're right. And again, don't forget, fast change is usually shallow change.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why that person falls prey to all those risks that we talked about earlier, the risks to recovery, and that. And so, gang, this idea that if you can just let this change has to take place inside, intrinsic to that person. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's where that's got to happen. The ruler exercise. And gang, this is no profound, again, the 11th tablet kind of a thing. It's just a cute little trick. The ruler exercise that can help with becoming aware of discrepancies, increasing importance. The ruler exercise really is on a scale of 1 to 10. Hey, imagine you have a ruler. One means completely unimportant, 12, a foot-long ruler, or a 10-inch ruler. 10, very important. Just have a client rank those different things right now. Let them see. And maybe once a week, let's take a look at this. Maybe one thing that, just a little thing you do in each counseling session is, let's ruler these things again. Last week it was a 3. This week all of a sudden it's a 7. That's interesting. Let's talk about that. What happened? How come? You see what I'm... And then let that client put in his or her own words. What's going on with this? How come that happened like that? Does that make sense? The ruler exercise is just, I mean, like I say, it's not like a profound magic wand or something, but just a little mental exercise. Let that, when that client feels those very real, well, last week it was a 3, this week it's a 7. That's a pretty big change. That's interesting. Let's talk about that. How come? What's this all about? And all that kind of stuff like that. Help that client be aware of that. Help that, and that for that client can also, it represents what? Itty bitty little change and stuff like that. In and of itself. In and of itself. And so the ruler exercise, just a neat little trick. Is it a tool? Can you use that? Another one of those basic strategies. Let that client learn how to do cost benefit. Best worst. That client at this point is real good at not thinking about it. This stuff past. Very often that client, should I go drinking tonight? Well, I don't. Well, I'll get in trouble again. Well, this will happen again. Well, my wife will. Yeah, but as soon as they hit those real costs, they say, "The hell, fuck it. I'm going to go drinking." You see what I'm saying? Help that client get back in touch with. Just learning how to. Learn how to. Again, practice. Cost benefit analysis. Worst, best case outcome kinds of things. Help that client learn how to start doing that in a real, a centered, a rational way again. So that when they are confronted with, and what do I call it? The use decision crisis. Should I use? Well, yeah, but that, fuck it. You see what I'm saying? No, get them. Yeah. No, let's really think about this for a minute. And they probably are good at not doing that right now. Why? Because they learned how to not do that right now. Why? Because that would bother them too much. That's why. That's why clients, they have, they're so good at going right to the buckets. Fuck it. And by helping that client get that instilled in them again. No, I do need to think about this. That really, I promised her that I wouldn't. Do you see what I'm saying with that? Help them. They have learned how to not do that. They need to learn how to do that. Why did they learn how not to do it? Because it makes this feel less bad. They need to learn how to do it. Does that make sense? Find out. Listen. Hear. What is, another mistake we make is we tell that client what's important in their life. And we tell them how and why it's important in their life. Which then illustrates why it's so damn stupid that they're throwing it away the way they are. What did I say about this? Don't just jump and holler about this. But it does matter. It's how you do it. And again, what is in the client's words? In the client's way of doing this, what is important to that client right now? In that client's words, what's important to that client? How do we then creatively, within the enmeshment of this empathy bond, how do we start to, what did we talk about? increase that importance in a way that it can be linked to change. And that's where, once again, guys, don't get all just worried about external stuff. Oh, that's just shallow external stuff. What's supposed to be important to you is, no, if that's what's important is, I don't care what it is right now. How can I use that as fuel? How is that another little fire stick? I can get the big log started. Does that make sense? Those kinds of things like that. That's what this is all about, you guys. And again, we tell our client what's important to them. Let's hear what's important to them. Does that make sense? And again, one of the things writing throughout this entire thing, reflective listening. By reflecting, what are some advantages? Well, number one, by reflecting. What was that major thing?
Empathy.
Well, the client already heard what they said. They said it. No, they didn't heard what they said. They said it. Setting it is different from hearing it. Different parts of the brain. By reflective listening, we're letting that client hear what they are saying. Another very important thing with reflective listening is what? You are demonstrating to the client you really do care. You really are interested. You really are listening. You hear what I'm saying with that? And you know what, gang? The empathy bond. That empathy bond. Another thing, that client needs to feel felt that way, but they also need to feel some level of caring compassion. They need to feel that caring compassion. You really do care. And true reflective listening is going to, this person is listening enough. They must really care. They really are hearing me. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? And so the payoff for that, so very powerful. That reflective listening. Another one of those, they love acronyms. OR. Reflective listening represented via ORs. They love acronyms. Open-ended questions. Asking open-ended questions. Ask the kinds of questions that's going to make that client have to think about their answer. Again, I wonder kinds of questions. Ask that client, they're really going to have to think about this answer. Do you want to get better?
No.
Yes, no. Of course I do. Versus, what would getting better feel like? What would this? What would that? How does getting better, and again, getting better, whatever getting better means, that kind of a thing like that. How does that fit into where you're, ask the kinds of questions that makes that client have to think about the answer. And in order to think about that answer, they're going to have to think about their situation. They're going to have to think about themselves. Do you hear what I'm saying with this? This way. Don't forget, guys, we're still in assessment here. We're doing this we're collecting information. We're getting stuff. But we're doing this. Affirmations. This is so damn important. How does it feel when you're in a heated, or at least a contentious discussion with somebody, and it becomes pretty obvious that the only reason they're listening to you is so that they can hear what they're going to use to throw right back at you? How bad does that feel?
Bad.
feels like shit, doesn't it? Number one, all that does is raise up your fight or flight shit. Now we're in number two, this person doesn't really care about me. They're just trying to get something to throw back at me and things like that. Affirm. You know what? And this is where, once again, affirmation. Affirm that. Right now, that is where that person is. I don't care how nuts, wild, crazy, this, that, or anything else it may sound on the surface. Affirm. This is where they are now. Now, don't forget. And again, another understanding. And I affirm. Okay, I get this. I hear what you're saying right now. And don't just come right back. I hear what you're saying right now, and here's why it's so damn wrong, stupid. No. Now remember something, you guys. Once again, as we said with understanding, be careful here. Understanding, affirmation, does not necessarily mean agree with, approve, endorse, that kind of a thing. But at least put yourself where that person is right now. Does that make sense? Let them, right now, that is where they are. That is. I don't care how nuts, crazy, I don't care what. That's where they are right now, for whatever reason. And the reason they're there may be to get you to just shut your damn mouth, but that's where they are right now. Don't attack that. Affirm that, understand that, and then where do we move from here? Does that make sense? Do you see the difference? Because what I do is that instead of, I'm giving you examples of what instead of this. Once again, listening just to get a comeback. That's instead of this. Don't do that. Very often, one of the other things you're doing with that is, don't forget, one of the greatest, most elegant ways of good resistance is to get into a big silly argument about what I said or what I meant. And now we're going to spend the rest of my counseling session arguing about what I really meant or what I said. And guess what? We don't have to talk about the rest of what I don't want to talk about. Don't get yourself into those traps. And again, as you reflect back and as you affirm. And again, reflections, ORs, they just love these acronyms. Those reflections. Summarizing. What Herman is doing is, let me say back to you what I think you just said. That's a summarizing. That's a good thing to do. And, okay, here's what I am getting from this. Here's what I think I heard from you. Here's what I think this is meaning. You see what I'm saying with that? Based on what I'm hearing. Summarize. And not just, and one mistake is that very often I'll summarize. So they, at the end of the session, they summarize. Summarize, maybe you need to summarize every 15 minutes. Why? At the end of the session, you missed something 30 minutes ago. The session could have been better. Maybe if you'd have checked it out then. Another, summarizing, number one, that once again is telling that client, you really are hearing, you really are caring, you really are this. And number two, another way to say it is checking it out. Are you on the right track here? Are you hearing? Are you responding to the right stuff the right way? Does that make sense? So this summary, I do that. I summarize at the end of every session. Well, maybe what you need to be doing is every 15 minutes or so, summarizing. Checking it out like that. Working with it.
Would you go back over reflections? Because I didn't quite follow.
Me neither.
When you were going over that, I've been in situations where there's that redirection, misdirection, that trying to reroute the energy or the conversation away from, but that's their behavior as if they're deflecting. But I don't understand how, unless this reflections is previous things that we've talked about as like reflective listening. If that's just
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so
reflective listening.
So it's just a repeat of the above.
And don't forget, not only reflecting words, thought, reflecting emotions. reflecting feelings. Again, helping that client experience him or herself. Reflections. So very important. Reflections. Does that make sense? You hear what I'm saying with this?
Yeah,
Cool.
sometime I'm gonna want to ask some questions offline about this.
Does that clarify though? And I heard you write that question about reflection. Does that write that for you?
New sheet of paper.
Resolving ambivalence. Gang, I don't care how, listen to this. I don't care how good this client is at this right now. Their cognitive dissonance resolution, their way of living with this, their way of excusing, justifying, thising, thating this. I don't care how good they are at this. If you listen careful enough. She's had no costs, so, but there is something there. There is some. Why would she be there? There's ambivalence there. Whatever she thinks she's doing, getting away, then why is she going to an AA meeting? I don't care how good this person is. If you listen well, you're going to hear ambivalence. What is ambivalence? What do I mean by ambivalence? There's a sense of unsureness.
Yeah.
There's an approach avoidance, an approach conflict going on here. There's something that's not feeling right to that client. You hear what I'm saying with this?
Is it like a clash?
A clash,
Okay.
a dissonance. I don't care how good they are at cognitive dissonance resolution, there's some stress there. Somehow, you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's something going on. You have to feel that. You have to find that. That ambivalence. That I'd like to go here, but then I got,
For some reason I can't.
That ambivalence.
It's like an internal conflict.
An internal conflict. Any of those things you're calling it, those are all, that sense of ambivalence. Of course I want a good life. Of course I want a happy relationship. Of course I want to feel good about myself. Of course I want to feel proud of what I do. Of course I this, of course I that. But I keep doing this and that. Well, here's why I do it, because that life is so unfair. But gang, somewhere there's ambivalence there. You have to listen to it, feel it. See what I'm saying with that? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing like that. And then, you have to help that. What is it? That client, of course, we talked about this already. We talked about what was that? The approach, avoidance, conflict, and again, risks. Of course they want the good stuff of life. They want to love, feel love. They want to this, they want to that. They want to feel good. They want all that stuff. Then what the hell are they doing all this stuff instead? That's ambivalence. They say they want this, but they're doing this. That's ambivalence. They try and sneak out this. What did we say about that? Remember this point. Sometimes the closer they get to this, the scarier it feels, and the scarier this feels, the better that looks. You see what I'm saying with that? That's all areas, examples, ideas of ambivalence. We have to help this client with all these things we're talking about right now. Again, increasing importance, dealing with these discrepancies, hearing this, feeling this, understanding this. In a way that we can start to identify and start to resolve that ambivalence. As long as there's something that keeps pulling this person back, it's going to interfere with the motivation to go that way. Does that make sense? And a lot of that is just what? Well, those basic fears. Sometimes that ambivalence is wrapped around those basic, hey, well, I just snuck another oldie but goldie in there. Hey, what were those, what were the two basic fears? Fear number one was what? Just plain letting go of the drug or the substance in itself. That person who has wedded themselves emotionally to that. They can't, there are people waking up right now, they can't imagine getting out of bed, taking a shower, getting dressed without their drug first. And things like that. The ambivalence over letting go of that drug alone. My God, I won't be able to function without it. Remember, boy, another oldie but goldie. That's where I demystify that drug. Guess what? The stuff that's making you take that shower is already inside your head. It's not that drug. It's not that pile of powder, right? You see how all this works together. Hear, be a part of, use, feel, every single thing we talk about every single day all comes together in this big pile of the way you do this. Does that make sense? All this together. What was the second big fear? The second big fear. The first fear was letting go of the what was the second?
Letting go of your addiction survival.
Letting go of that addiction survival. You have learned how to. I mean, how many people good enough to get 30, 40 controlled pills a day? I'm pretty fucking good at what I do. Everybody likes to feel good at something. Everybody likes to feel good at something. Everybody. That's terrifying for that person. They're going to feel naked, vulnerable. I don't know. You see what I'm saying with that? That's my strength. That's my courage. That's my ability.
What's the first fear?
That's how I do it.
The fear.
The first fear was
Fear,
letting
fear.
go of the drug. No.
Oh.
The first fear was letting go of the drug.
Oh, letting go of the drug.
The second fear is letting go of the addiction survival persona.
Thank you.
What's the other big fear? This one, harking back to the first semester also.
Is it a relationship with the drug?
Not the relationship with the drug, that drug thing.
Isn't it?
The fear of failure. That idiot moron thing when counselors say you're afraid of success. No, that person's not afraid of success. They're terrified of failure. Those things can all play major roles in this ambivalence. That's what, of course, I can't even imagine being without my drug. I can't, you see what I'm saying with this? That's going to fuel that ambivalence. Of course I want those good things. Who wouldn't? I'm not stupid. I'm not crazy. Of course I want somebody to love me. Of course I want this. Of course I want that. Of course. Then why don't you go get it? I will hunt you down if I ever hear you say it. But you hear what I'm saying with it? Identifying and then starting to resolve that ambivalence. And that means then, gang, bring to the fore, bring to the table, let that client know it's safe to talk about the fears. The fear of losing the drug. Let that mean you're afraid of losing that drug. For crying out loud, you should be glad that drug's going to be gone. What the hell's the matter? What do you mean you're afraid to? What, you're so full of shit. Do you realize? I mean, yeah. You hear this? Is that client going to deal with that ambivalence? Every time they open their mouth, you're going to jump down their throat because they're so full of shit? No. You got to let them. You got to let that person talk about these fears. Oh, they're terrified. They're terrified of letting go of that drug. And what does this mean here? I want this, but in order to get this, I got to let go of all that. That's scaring the hell out of that person. That's what I mean by ambivalence. Hear what I'm saying with this? That's what I mean by ambivalence.
Question.
Let that client voice those fears, talk about it, and join them in that. Yes.
So in joining them in this, would that be considered one of the aspects of the empowerment? Empowering them to explore those things that are frightening?
And let them feel, yes.
Okay.
Letting go of the addiction survival persona.
All these things are interrelated. All these little, you guys got piles of lists here with this. And all of these things, what we're doing is bringing that word on that list, that phrase on that list into a what? Clinical, meaningful piece of a whole here.
Right. We're looking at the tapestry from different angles.
Resolving that ambivalence. And the best way to do that is to make sure that client knows it's safe to talk about those fears in the first place. What else did we say? Let that client, you know what? I know this feels so antithesis. We talked about this last semester. Letting that client grieve the loss of that substance. That sounds so nuts and antithesis. What do you mean grieve the loss? They should be glad it's gone out of their life. What do you mean grieve it? Undone business becomes poltergeists that haunt recovery. Putting an emotional closure on that relationship with that substance is a very important thing. Does that make sense? And as they do that, as those fears become less provocative, whatever it is that's interfering with this movement, as they're resolving that ambivalence, once again, this looks easier, more attractive, and more maybe I can after all. Does that make sense, you guys? Do you hear what I'm saying with this?
What was the second fear?
First fear is the drug itself.
Right.
That second fear is letting go of the addiction survival persona. All the ways I've become, I am good. I'll tell you what. Like I said, I'm so good at what I do, I'm not stealing your glass, you're insisting I take it. That's how good I am. Now I gotta let all that go. I'm gonna feel vulnerable. I'm gonna feel weak. I'm gonna feel like you see what I'm saying? That's scary. I don't like that. I get it. Those kinds of things like that. That way that I survived, that way that I learned to survive in addiction, probably gonna have to be exchanged for what? From addiction survival to what?
Recovery survival.
Recovery survival. Does this make sense? Do you hear what I'm saying here, you guys? Powerful, a lot of stuff today. Boy, I'll tell you what, I better be hearing some good wow points on Thursday. Ambivalence is often seen as a kind of bullshit resistance game. One of the best ways not to have to do what I got to do to get here is to be ambivalent and concerned about it. And if that counselor sees that as just some kind of a bullshit resistance, they're going to react accordingly. There goes everything. Does that make sense? No, we see ambivalence as expected, not pathological. We help resolve that approach avoidance conflict. And as that occurs, we're going to start to hear change talk. As that occurs, we're going to start to hear that change talk. Thoughts, feelings, reactions.
Still ready.
Do you hear what I'm saying?
I'm super distracted in my brain. And how are you going to test us on this? I know that's ridiculous.
He's going to throw up.
I know that that's the most ridiculous question to ask you right now, but I'm like,
Can I see the test?
how are...
That's called the internship.
I'm going to ask you to talk to me about this stuff.
Okay.
As if you were explaining this to somebody else.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you got to think about this, I mean, maybe it's just my personal belief, but letting go of that addiction persona, survival persona, sometimes that's what drives people. It's just something built in them because it's been in you so long that
It becomes part of their personality.
becomes a part of their personality. It's not necessary. I understand the addiction part. You want to try to get rid of the addiction part. But if I've been hustling for so long and I may change the hustle. My hustle may be selling socks and shoes and T-shirts and stuff, getting them at a small prices, selling them, and open up a store. But I'm not selling rocks and blows no
That's
more.
exactly what I'm saying.
You see what I'm saying?
What you do is, because remember this, you can never, Newton and early physics taught us this, you can never stop energy, but you can change it. See what I'm saying? So, yeah.
When you're
So,
going,
you're a
you're
real
going
good
from
drug dealer.
number 2, letting go of the addiction.
Yeah, exactly. You're a real good drug dealer. How do you use that energy to become a real good something else dealer? In a healthy, positive way in your life. Yeah, you can never stop energy.
Right.
You change it. We're going to help change that from addiction survival to recovery survival.
And some things that happened in between that is because I was so used to when I was selling the drugs and being a part of the drugs, I was buying stuff. You come to me with a TV, I get that TV because I know that TV costs $500 in the store. I'm getting it for $200.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's all part of it.
Now I'm not doing drugs no more. I'm on Marketplace.
No?
I'm getting stuff on Marketplace. I'm getting it cheap and I'm selling it for higher.
What we're
You
gonna
know,
do
it's
is,
still
I mean, think about it. Once again,
change one thing.
we're not gonna, you can't stop energy,
Right.
you change it.
Direct it.
Does that make sense? And so, that's what I mean by that.
I embraced couponing when I got sober.
Yeah.
Joined all the rewards
The
programs.
life of Jean.
Local entry.
She's gonna fold
It was
her
game.
money.
The more a client talks about change, as we elicit change talk, as we help this person start to see those inconsistencies, that ambivalence, as we start to change that what feels important to them. As all of a sudden, what was important as a 3, now it's a 7 or an 8. And that starts that change talk. The more the client talks about change, the better the chance of change. Yes.
With the direction of attitude and everything, my dad's in active addiction right now. Well, he was. He got out of prison 60 days ago. So with that, I dropped 15, 20 pounds in 3 days. So that kind of directs me towards the whole addiction as a disease thing, because it affects the whole entire family.
Right. Okay.
My sister, she has OCD. My little brother, she has OCD. And now the OCD is coming out of me because I was kind of the mom of them. If that makes sense. So I don't know, with the direction of positive energy, I'm keeping myself busy with my OCD. Compared to my sister, she has sports and stuff.
And that's what we help that client. Again, it's just back to the arousal thing. They used to be here, they went up here. If we can get them back to here, but how do we change that to positive energy? Can't stop energy. We change that energy.
The whole hygiene spiral thing.
All these things that we've looked at today, every single thing we've looked at today, culminating in what? Just the very beginnings. Maybe the first letters, the first syllables of change talk. And then we go with that. And again, the more the client talks about change, the better the chance of that change. Is everybody cool? That's what that's all about. A lot of stuff, you guys. We're going to call it today, let you get to work. I got a couple things I want to talk to a couple people. And I will see you, and we're back into the brain. Do you see the interrelationship between these two things?
Mm-hmm.
Get back into the brain on Thursday. See you then.
One of these days offline, I want to talk to you about the Taoist mystical Yi, Qi, and Li relationship.